Our mornings always followed the same peaceful routine. I would wake before sunrise to prepare breakfast while my daughter, Sophia, completed her morning training exercises in the backyard. That particular Tuesday was no different. The kitchen filled with the aroma of scrambled eggs and toast as I watched through the window as Sophia moved through her forms with practiced precision. Her movements were fluid yet powerful, the result of 8 years of dedicated martial arts training and countless competitions. The medals and trophies lining our hallway told the story of her journey from a shy 9-year-old to the confident 17-year-old state champion she had become. After losing her mother to cancer when she was just 7, martial arts became more than just a hobby for Sophia. It became her outlet, her strength, and eventually, her identity. I could not have been prouder of the young woman she had become. Our home was modest but well-maintained. The 2-bedroom ranch-style house sat on a 1/4-acre lot in Maple Creek Estates, a suburban development we had moved to 4 years ago seeking a fresh start. The neighborhood had initially seemed perfect: quiet streets, well-kept lawns, and friendly neighbors who welcomed us with homemade cookies and invitations to weekend barbecues. I still remember Mrs. Hernandez from across the street warning us about the homeowners association during our first week. "They can be a bit strict about the rules, but nothing unreasonable," she had said with a smile. For 3 years, that assessment had proven accurate. We received the occasional reminder about trash can placement or lawn maintenance, but nothing that ever felt oppressive or concerning. Everything changed 6 months ago when Carter Reynolds was elected HOA president. The previous board had resigned following disagreements over community fund allocations, and Reynolds had run unopposed with promises of enhancing community standards and protecting property values. Within weeks of taking office, the entire atmosphere of Maple Creek Estates transformed. New regulations appeared almost weekly. The acceptable colors for exterior paint narrowed from 30 options to just 5. Holiday decorations could only be displayed for precisely 14 days, not a day more. Even flower choices for front gardens now required pre-approval from the Aesthetic Committee, a group that no one seemed able to identify or contact. Violation notices began appearing in mailboxes with increasing frequency. The fines escalated rapidly, starting at $50 and doubling with each subsequent notice. Several neighbors, particularly elderly residents on fixed incomes, quietly put their homes up for sale rather than fight the system. The most disturbing change came 3 months ago when Reynolds introduced the Community Enhancement Officers at a sparsely attended HOA meeting. These men, dressed in black tactical-style uniforms with official-looking patches, were described as security consultants hired to ensure community standards compliance. Their unmarked vehicles began patrolling our streets day and night, stopping frequently to photograph properties and take notes. Neighbors who had once chatted freely across driveways now hurried inside when they saw each other. Community gatherings dwindled, then stopped entirely. An unnatural silence settled over Maple Creek Estates, broken only by the sound of car doors slamming as another family packed up and moved away. I had noticed these changes, but admittedly paid little attention to them. My focus remained on my work as a software developer and supporting Sophia through her final year of high school and martial arts competitions. "HOA politics," I told Sophia when she mentioned the strange men taking photos of our neighbors' Christmas lights. "It will all blow over once people get tired of the power trip." That dismissive attitude would prove to be one of the greatest mistakes of my life. The creeping authoritarianism I had ignored was about to come crashing through our front door in a way I could never have anticipated. Our peaceful world stood on the precipice of chaos, and I had been too blind to see the danger approaching until it was almost too late. The violation notice arrived on a Thursday afternoon, slipped into our mailbox in a crisp white envelope bearing the Maple Creek Estates logo. The official seal in bold red, "Violation," stamp made it look more like a court summons than a community notice. I opened it while walking back to the house, stopping dead in my tracks as I read the contents. Property at 1422 Oakwood Lane in violation of Aesthetic Code 37B, unauthorized decorative elements visible from street view. Specifically, garden statue in front yard flower bed. Fine, $250. Removal required within 48 hours to avoid additional penalties. The statue in question was a small angel figure, no more than 18 inches tall, partially hidden among the hydra. Ungias in our front garden. It had been a memorial to Sophia's mother, placed on the anniversary of her passing each year. We had received written approval for it from the previous HOA board 3 years ago. I pulled the approval documentation from my files and reread it, confirming that we had followed every requirement. The statue was the approved size, neutral in color, and positioned exactly as specified. There was no legitimate reason for this violation. The next morning, I arrived at the HOA office 10 minutes before their posted opening time. The building was a converted ranch house at the entrance to our subdivision, recently renovated with sleek modern furniture and stark white walls. Through the glass door, I could see Carter Reynolds already at his desk, a man in his 50s with meticulously styled silver hair and an expensive suit that seemed out of place for a suburban HOA president. When the receptionist finally unlocked the door, Reynolds glanced up with visible annoyance. "We open at 9, he said, not bothering to check his watch. The digital clock on his desk clearly showed 8:57. "I need to discuss this violation notice," I said, placing the envelope and my approval documentation on his desk. "The statue was approved 3 years ago. Here is the signed documentation." Reynolds barely glanced at the papers. "New board, new standards," he stated flatly. "The previous administration was far too lenient about decorative elements. The approval is no longer valid." "That is not how contracts work," I countered, my voice remaining calm despite my rising frustration. "The approval has no expiration date and was issued according to the bylaws in effect at that time." Reynolds pressed a button on his desk phone. "Linda, please have security escort Mr. Wilson out. He is becoming disruptive." Before I could protest that I had raised my voice, 2 men appeared at the office door. They wore black uniforms with tactical vests bearing patches that read Community Enforcement. Most alarmingly, both had holstered handguns visible on their belts. Their presence seemed wildly disproportionate for a discussion about a garden statue. "Sir, please come with us," the larger of the two said, his hand resting casually near his weapon. "This discussion is not over," I said to Reynolds. "You cannot retroactively revoke approved installations." As the guards led me toward the exit, I overheard Reynolds speaking into his phone. "Yes, Wilson at 1422 Oakwood. Make sure the team understands he is resisting compliance. We need to make an example. Establish authority early before others think they can challenge the new standards." The implications of that partial conversation sent a chill through me. This was not about a garden statue. This was about power and control. When I arrived home that afternoon, fresh footprints in the mulch around our flower beds caught my attention. Someone had been walking around our property while we were away. Near the backyard gate, I noticed cigarette butts that had not been there that morning. Moving quickly around the house, I discovered multiple angles where our property had been photographed, evidenced by disturbed foliage and clear boot prints in the soft soil. That evening, I explained the situation to Sophia as we sat at the kitchen table. Her expression hardened as I described the armed guards and Reynolds' veiled threats. "That is ridiculous," she said, her voice quiet but intense. "Mom's statue stays, they have no right to do this." I nodded, feeling a resolve building within me. I am going to challenge this at the next HOA meeting. This has gone beyond reasonable community standards enforcement. What I did not tell her was the growing sense of unease I felt about the armed men who had escorted me out. Something dangerous was taking shape in our once peaceful neighborhood, and we had somehow found ourselves directly in its path. The monthly HOA meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening at the community center. Attendance had dwindled over recent months, but word of increasing violations had drawn an unusually large crowd. Nearly 60 residents filled the uncomfortable plastic chairs arranged in neat rows facing the board table. I arrived early, securing a seat near the front. As other homeowners filtered in, I noticed the strategic positioning of the security team, 4 men in their now familiar black uniforms stationed at the exits and corners of the room. Their hands rested casually near their holstered weapons, their eyes scanning the crowd with practiced vigilance. Carter Reynolds called the meeting to order precisely at 7, flanked by 3 board members who never spoke or made eye contact with the residents. The agenda began with announcements of new regulations regarding lawn maintenance schedules and approved mailbox designs. When the meeting finally opened for community comments, I raised my hand immediately. Reynolds acknowledged. Jed several other residents first, each raising minor concerns that were quickly dismissed. After 20 minutes, he finally nodded in my direction. I stood and approached the microphone set up in the center aisle. My name is Daniel Wilson from 1422 Oakwood Lane. I would like to address the recent violation notice regarding our garden statue, which was previously approved by the board 3 years ago. As I reached for my documentation, the microphone emitted a sharp squeal before going silent. I tapped it twice, but it remained dead. Technical difficulties, Reynolds stated with a thin smile. Unfortunately, we need to move on, and for the record, your complaint is not on the approved agenda for discussion. Please submit it in writing for consideration at next month's meeting. This cannot wait a month, I said, raising my voice to be heard without the microphone. Your security team is harassing residents and issuing violations that contradict existing approvals. Reynolds nodded almost imperceptibly, and 2 security guards moved toward me. This meeting follows Robert's Rules of Order, Reynolds announced to the room. Outbursts will not be tolerated. Mr. Wilson, if you cannot respect our procedures, you will be removed and fined for disrupting official HOA business. The room fell silent as the guards positioned themselves on either side of me. Looking around, I saw fear in the eyes of my neighbors, but also recognition. Whatever was happening in Maple Creek Estates, I was not the only one experiencing it. I returned to my seat, recognizing that this public forum would not provide the resolution I sought. As the meeting concluded, Reynolds made one final announcement. The board has approved additional funding for our community enhancement team. You will be seeing increased patrols to ensure our neighborhood standards remain the highest in the county. In the parking lot afterward, a small group gathered around my car. Margaret Winters, a retired nurse who had lived in the community for over 20 years, spoke first. They cited me for holiday decorations last week, said my Valentine's wreath was displayed 3 days too long. I worked double shifts at the hospital. The fine is $300. Others shared similar stories. James Chen had received daily citations for his grass being precisely half an inch too tall while he was traveling for business. The Rodriguez family had been fined for children's toys visible in their backyard, which was fully fenced and barely visible from the street. Most troubling was the information shared by Robert Gonzalez, a former police officer who had moved to our community after retirement. Those guards are carrying actual firearms, but they have no legal authority whatsoever, he explained quietly. I checked with former colleagues. They are employed by a private security company called Reynolds Protection Services. They are not law enforcement and have no jurisdiction to issue citations or enter private property without permission. Reynolds Protection Services, I repeated, as in Carter Reynolds. Gonzalez nodded grimly. His brother owns the company. They have contracts with several HOAs in the county. Always the same pattern: take over the board, implement strict rules, hire the security team, drive out homeowners who resist. That night I began researching. County records confirmed that Carter Reynolds had connections to similar takeovers in 3 other communities over the past 5 years. Each followed the same pattern: rapid implementation of strict rules, aggressive enforcement, and eventual property devaluation, followed by bulk purchases by a development company that also appeared connected to the Reynolds family. Over the next 2 weeks, the surveillance of our home intensified. I documented security vehicles passing our house 23 times in a single day, slowing to photograph our property each time. When I tried to photograph them in return, they would speed away only to return from another direction an hour later. Sophia reported seeing the same black SUV parked near her bus stop 3 days in a row. He watches me get off the bus and follows at a distance until I turn onto our street, she said, her voice steady but her eyes betraying her concern. The mailbox filled with new violation notices. Garbage cans visible from the street for 15 minutes after collection, unapproved plant species in the side garden, a barely visible window screen tier on a second-floor window. Each came with escalating fines and warnings about property liens for non-payment. I documented everything meticulously: photographs, timestamps, copies of all communications. A pattern of escalating harassment was clearly evident, all seemingly designed to either force compliance with arbitrary rules or drive us out of our home altogether. What they failed to understand was that this house represented our fresh start after losing Sophia's mother. The garden statue they wanted removed was one of the few physical connections Sophia had to her mother's memory. We were not going to be intimidated into abandoning our home or our dignity. The battle lines had been drawn, and despite their greater resources, we were prepared to stand our ground. The confrontation I had been dreading finally occurred on a Wednesday afternoon. I returned home from work earlier than usual, having received a text from our neighbor Mrs. Hernandez. "2 men in your backyard right now." Called out to them, but they ignored me. As I turned onto our street, I spotted the now familiar black SUV parked directly in front of our house. My heart raced as I pulled into the driveway and hurried toward the back gate. It stood wide open, a clear violation of our privacy and property rights. In our backyard, 2 uniformed men moved methodically across our lawn. One took photographs while the other made notes on a tablet. They were focusing particular attention on the small stone patio we had installed the previous summer, a project that had been properly permitted through both the city and the previous HOA board. "Excuse me," I called out as I approached. "You are trespassing on private property. I need you to leave immediately." The larger of the 2 men turned slowly, his expression dismissive. He was well over 6 feet tall with a muscular build that strained against his tactical uniform. A name tag on his vest read Davis. "HOA enforcement," he stated, his hand moving to rest casually on his holstered weapon. "We received reports of unauthorized hardscaping modifications." "This patio was approved and permitted," I countered, maintaining my distance but standing my ground. "And regardless, you have no legal right to enter private property without permission. You need to leave now." The second man, shorter but equally intimidating, flashed a badge that closely resembled police identification, but bore the community enforcement logo I had come to recognize. "We have authority under HOA Bylaw Amendment 34C to inspect properties for compliance," he stated with practiced authority. "Interference with official inspections results in automatic fines and potential legal action." "There is no such amendment," I replied, having thoroughly reviewed our HOA documents in recent weeks. "You are not law enforcement, and that badge does not give you any legal authority. Leave my property now, or I will call the actual police and report you for trespassing." Davis exchanged a look with his partner, his expression hardening. With deliberate slowness, he walked toward my carefully tended flower beds, his heavy boots crushing several plants beneath them. "Your cooperation would make everyone's life easier," his partner said, voice deceptively soft. "Some problems in this neighborhood seem to be escalating unnecessarily. Accidents happen, you know. Cars get damaged. House fires start from faulty wiring. Would be a shame if something happened while your daughter was home alone." The thinly veiled threat sent ice through my veins. I pulled out my phone and began recording their faces, badges, and vehicle. "I am documenting this trespassing and threat for the police," I stated, my voice steadier than I felt. "Leave now." As they finally moved toward the gate, I noticed Sophia watching from her bedroom window, her expression a mixture of anger and concern. This had gone beyond HOA overreach. They had just threatened my child. At the police station an hour later, the desk sergeant barely glanced at my complaint form before sliding it back across the counter. "This is a civil matter between you and your HOA," he stated flatly, not meeting my eyes. "They were armed, trespassed on my property, and made threats against my family," I insisted. "That is not a civil matter." The sergeant sighed, finally looking up. Look, I get it. HOAs can be a pain, but these security companies operate in a gray area. They are not impersonating officers unless they specifically claim to be police. Property disputes need to go through civil courts. As he spoke, two officers in uniform passed behind the desk. One nodded toward the security company name on my form. Reynolds Protection. Yeah, half our department moonlights for them on weekends. Good overtime pay. Suddenly, the sergeant's reluctance made more sense. The connection between the security company and local law enforcement complicated matters significantly. I would find no help here. That night, 14 concerned homeowners gathered in James Chen's basement. We had been careful about the invitations, speaking in person rather than by phone or email, wary of who might be monitoring our communications. Lisa Abernathy, an attorney who lived on Willow Street, confirmed our suspicions. The HOA has clearly exceeded their legal authority, but fighting them will be complicated. They have resources and connections we lack individually. Then we pool our resources, I suggested. Document everything. Build a case showing the pattern of harassment, intimidation, and selective enforcement. We agreed to form a coalition, each taking specific responsibilities. Some would research county regulations and HOA bylaws, others would document security patrol patterns, and others would discreetly approach additional neighbors to build support. As the meeting concluded, Robert Gonzalez pulled me aside. Be careful, Daniel. I have seen operations like this before. They will escalate before they back down. Make sure your daughter understands the potential danger. On the walk home, I explained the situation fully to Sophia. Her martial arts training had taught her discipline and situational awareness, but this was a different kind of threat. I want you to be extra vigilant, I told her. Travel with friends, stay in public areas, and call me immediately if you feel unsafe or notice anyone following you. She nodded solemnly. I know how to handle myself, Dad, but I understand. What I did not say was how the security guard's casual threat had shaken me to my core. The thought of anyone threatening Sophia filled me with a protective fury I had not experienced since her mother's illness. These men had picked the wrong family to intimidate. We would not be backing down, no matter what came next. The retaliation began almost immediately. Our mailbox appeared crushed one morning, the metal post bent as though struck by a vehicle. The garden lights that illuminated our walkway were mysteriously broken, glass shards scattered across the lawn. Each incident was minor enough to be dismissed as vandalism or accidents, but the timing left little doubt about the actual cause. The surveillance became nearly constant. Security vehicles cruised past our home hourly, slowing to photograph any activity. When I left for work, they followed at a distance for several blocks before turning around. When I returned, they were often already parked nearby, watching. The most disturbing incident occurred 3 days after our neighborhood meeting. Sophia called me at work, her voice controlled but tense. Dad, that black SUV followed my bus again today, she reported. But this time, when I got off, it followed me all 3 blocks home. The driver rolled down his window and took photos of me walking. He said my backpack violated HOA color regulations. Are you safe now? I asked, already grabbing my keys to head home. Yes, Mrs. Hernandez saw what was happening and came outside. She walked with me to our door. The SUV left after that. I left work immediately, my mind racing with fury and concern. Following and photographing a minor constituted harassment by any definition. This had crossed yet another line. Our coalition had been busy. James Chen had obtained financial records showing hundreds of thousands of dollars diverted from community maintenance funds to Reynolds Protection Services, far more than the contracted amount approved by homeowners. Lisa Abernathy discovered that the board had never properly filed the bylaw amendments they claimed authorized their enforcement actions. Most damning was the connection Robert Gonzalez uncovered. Carter Reynolds' brother not only owned the security company, but was also the majority shareholder in a development firm that had purchased foreclosed homes in the other communities where similar tactics had been employed. We compiled everything into a comprehensive report, complete with photographs, financial records, and sworn statements from affected homeowners. An emergency board meeting was called to address urgent community concerns, giving us a forum to present our findings. The community center was packed when I arrived with our documentation. Carter Reynolds sat at the board table, flanked by more security personnel than I had ever seen at a meeting. His expression darkened when he saw the number of residents in attendance. "This meeting will address only the items on the approved agenda," he announced as soon as he called the meeting to order. "Unscheduled concerns can be submitted in writing for future consideration." "Point of order," Lisa Abernathy called out, rising from her seat. "According to our bylaws, Article 7, Section 3, homeowners may motion to amend the agenda at the beginning of any meeting with a simple majority vote." Murmurs of agreement spread through the room. Reynolds appeared momentarily flustered before regaining his composure. "Very well, those in favor of hearing the concerns of Mr. Wilson's group, please raise your hands." Nearly every hand in the room went up. Reynolds could not ignore the overwhelming majority. I connected my laptop to the projector and began my presentation. For the past several months, our community has experienced unprecedented enforcement actions by individuals claiming HOA authority. The room fell silent as I methodically outlined each violation of HOA bylaws. ND state law, financial records displayed on the wall showed the suspicious payments. Photographs documented the armed security forces trespassing on private property. Testimonials from elderly residents described intimidation tactics that had forced them to sell their homes at below-market rates. Reynolds' face darkened with each slide. Before I could finish the presentation, he motioned to the security team. 2 guards immediately moved toward me. "This meeting is over," Reynolds announced. "These accusations are slanderous and will be addressed through proper legal channels." The guards grabbed my arms, the metal of their holsters cold against my skin as they escorted me toward the exit. Reynolds followed closely behind. "You have no idea what you have started," he hissed as they pushed me through the doors. Behind me, I could hear the chaos erupting in the meeting room as other homeowners protested the abrupt ending. That night a storm rolled in, bringing heavy rain and wind that rattled the windows of our home. Sophia and I had just finished dinner when pounding on our front door jarred us from conversation. The clock read 9:47 p.m., far too late for any legitimate visitor. Through the door's window, I could see 3 uniformed men standing on our porch. Their faces were tight with anticipation, hands hovering near their weapons. I recognized Davis, the large guard who had threatened us in the backyard. "Maple Creek HOA emergency inspection," he called out, his voice barely audible over the rain. "We have reports of a water leak that may be threatening adjacent properties. Open the door immediately." I turned to Sophia, speaking quietly. "Get your phone and start recording. Stay back but within sight." She nodded, moving silently into position in the hallway as I approached the door, my own phone already recording. The pounding came again, harder this time. Through the glass, I could see Davis' expression, not concerned about a water leak, but eager for confrontation. The 2 men flanking him shifted impatiently, hands still resting near their holstered weapons. This was the moment everything would change. I could feel it with absolute certainty. Whatever happened next would determine not just our fate, but potentially the future of our entire community. Sophia moved into position behind me, her stance solid and balanced, just as she had been trained. "I need to see a warrant or court order," I called through the door, holding my phone visibly to show I was recording. "Otherwise, you have no legal right to enter my home, especially at this hour." "This is an emergency HOA inspection," Davis shouted back, his patience visibly thinning. "Water damage could be spreading to foundation structures. Open the door now or face additional fines and legal action." "If there is an actual water emergency, call the city emergency services," I responded. "They have proper authority. I do not consent to your entry without proper legal documentation." Davis exchanged glances with the other guards. What happened next occurred with shocking speed. The largest guard reared back and slammed his shoulder against the door. The wood frame splintered with a sickening crack as the door burst inward. Davis entered first, hand already moving to his holster. "HOA Emergency Authority," he barked, advancing into our living room. The other two guards followed closely behind, spreading out to control the space. My heart pounded in my chest as I continued recording with my phone. "You are breaking and entering. I have not given you permission to enter my home. This is being recorded." Davis ignored me, scanning the room with practiced movements. "Check for the water source," he ordered one of the other guards, though none of them appeared remotely interested in finding a leak. It was at that moment that Sophia stepped into view from the hallway, her phone also raised to record the intrusion. The reaction from Davis was immediate and terrifying. His hand moved to his holster, pulling his weapon with practiced efficiency. The gun cleared the holster and pointed directly at my 17-year-old daughter. Time seemed to slow down. 8 years of martial arts training manifested in Sophia's response. Her body moved with fluid precision, muscle memory taking over before conscious thought could even process the danger. Her right hand struck Davis' wrist with pinpoint accuracy, applying pressure to the radial nerve while simultaneously pivoting to position herself inside his guard. The gun clattered to the hardwood floor as she executed a perfect joint lock, using his own momentum and weight against him. With controlled application of pressure, she drove the much larger man to his knees. His face contorted in pain as she secured his arm behind his back in a position that prevented movement without causing permanent injury, exactly as she had been trained. The entire sequence took less than 3 seconds. The remaining G-guards froze in place, clearly unprepared for this scenario. The confidence and arrogance that had carried them through our front door evaporated in an instant. They looked at each other, uncertain whether to escalate further or retreat. "She broke my arm," Davis gasped, though Sophia had done no such thing. The joint lock was painful but caused no actual damage when applied correctly. "Your colleague pulled a gun on a minor," I stated, my voice steadier than I would have thought possible. "That is assault with a deadly weapon. My daughter defended herself using non-lethal restraint. We have everything on video." The sound of sirens cut through the rain outside. One of our neighbors had called the actual police upon seeing the forced entry. The remaining guards backed toward the door, abandoning their colleague still secured in Sophia's expertly applied hold. "This is not over," one of them muttered as they retreated into the storm. Within minutes, real police officers arrived, weapons drawn as they entered through our broken door. "Police, everyone on the ground now." "My daughter is restraining an armed intruder," I called out, slowly placing my phone on the coffee table while keeping my hands visible. "We are the homeowners. These men forced entry claiming to be HOA security." Confusion reigned for several tense moments as officers secured the scene. Sophia maintained the joint lock until an officer was ready to take over, then released Davis with the same controlled precision she had used to subdue him. "He pulled a gun on me," she explained calmly to the officer, pointing to the weapon still lying on the floor. "I disarmed him using a regulation competition hold." The transformation in the officer's demeanor was immediate once they reviewed the video evidence from both our phones. Davis' wrists were soon secured with authentic handcuffs as another officer recited his Miranda rights. The weapon was collected as evidence, along with the fake badge he had presented earlier. More police arrived, taking statements and photographs of our broken door. When they ran the serial number on Davis' weapon, their professional demeanor hardened further. "This weapon was reported stolen from a sporting goods store last year," the sergeant informed us. "And Mr. Davis here has previous charges for impersonating security personnel in another county. His guard certification was revoked 2 years ago." As Davis was led to a police cruiser, the sergeant turned to Sophia with genuine respect. "That was some impressive restraint technique, young lady. Where did you learn that?" 8 years of competitive martial arts," she answered simply. My instructor emphasizes control and minimal force. Well, it probably saved lives tonight, he responded, including his. As the police finished their investigation, one officer pulled me aside. Sir, I recommend you and your daughter stay elsewhere tonight. We will have additional patrols in the area, but until we determine if others are involved, a precautionary relocation might be wise. We packed overnight bags and accepted Mrs. Hernandez's offer to stay in her guest room. As we left, I noticed news vans already arriving, drawn by the police radio traffic about armed security impersonators and a teenage martial artist who had disarmed them. The storm had finally passed, both literally and figuratively. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of hope that our community might recover from the darkness that had enveloped it. What had begun as an HOA dispute had escalated to armed intimidation and ended with handcuffs and justice. The true battle was just beginning, but the balance of power had shifted dramatically in a single rain-soaked evening. Morning news vans lined our street as crews prepared for live broadcasts. The headlines scrolling across the bottom of screens read, HOA security force arrests, corruption and intimidation revealed. Reporters interviewed neighbors who now spoke freely about the intimidation they had experienced over the past months. The investigation expanded rapidly. Search warrants executed at the HOA office uncovered falsified financial records, unauthorized bylaw amendments, and documentation of the kickback scheme between the HOA and Reynolds Protection Services. Carter Reynolds was taken into custody that afternoon, charged with fraud, conspiracy, and operating an unlicensed security firm. Davis faced the most serious charges: breaking and entering, impersonating security personnel, illegal possession of a stolen firearm, and assault with a deadly weapon. His prior security license revocations became public record, along with similar incidents in 2 other counties where he had threatened homeowners while working for Reynolds. The other security guards quickly turned on their employers, providing testimony in exchange for reduced charges. They revealed a systematic pattern of intimidation designed to force out homeowners. WHO resisted the new regulations. Properties were then purchased at below-market rates by a development company partially owned by the Reynolds brothers. Former board members distanced themselves, claiming ignorance of the president's actions. Several admitted to being coerced into supporting his initiatives through threats and blackmail. The entire operation had been more extensive and organized than any of us had imagined. An emergency community meeting was held the following week at the local high school gymnasium. The turnout was unprecedented. Nearly every homeowner in Maple Creek Estates attended. The County Housing Authority supervised the election of an interim board comprised of longtime residents with established reputations for integrity. The first action of the new board was to disband the security force and implement transparency measures for all HOA activities. Financial records would be published monthly, and all meetings would be recorded and made available to residents. A strict limitation on fines and enforcement procedures was established, requiring multiple warnings before any penalties could be assessed. 2 weeks later, a settlement check arrived from the insurance company covering the HOA. The letter accompanying it acknowledged the unauthorized actions of former board members and provided compensation for our property damage and emotional distress. The amount was substantial, but more valuable was the restoration of our sense of security and community. As spring turned to summer, the neighborhood began to heal. Former residents who had been forced out were contacted and offered first right of refusal to repurchase their homes at fair market value, funded by the assets seized in the criminal investigation. Many returned, bringing back the diversity and warmth that had once defined our community. Neighbors began to gather again for weekend barbecues and holiday celebrations. The rigid conformity that had been enforced was replaced with a reasonable approach to neighborhood standards. Gardens bloomed with variety, children played freely in yards, and conversations across driveways resumed their friendly cadence. My daughter accepted the community's gratitude with characteristic grace. Though uncomfortable with the attention, she understood that her actions had helped expose corruption that extended far beyond our neighborhood. Her martial arts instructor used the incident in classes to emphasize the responsibility that comes with training, the obligation to use skills for protection, never intimidation.